Hello, everybody, and welcome to this session for the Drum's Creative Transformation Festival. This time we're looking at how remote creativity is allowing agencies to collaborate on creative from across the world. So this session is going to explore the challenges faced by agencies when it comes to working up amazing creative when we're not in a room together. So without that real world whiteboard on which to draw, how are agencies prototyping the look, design, and feel of a campaign and collaborating on solving a brief? So from tech tools to culture changes, we're going to hear from a panel of experts about how they're sorting the issues of remote collaboration and making it work for them. So I am joined by Jenny Stanley, who is founder and managing director of Appetite Creative, Karl Velasco, who's the creative director at Cult London in New York, and Chris Goddard, who's the VP of creative at Jellyfish. So thank you all for taking the time to have a conversation with us today.
You too, pleasure.
Having us.
Hi, Chris. Hi, Jenny and Chris.
Hey, too many Chris's. Actually, and I'll use that as a leaping off point. So Chris, I wondered if you could maybe set the scene for this, because obviously there's been much talk about the rapid acceleration of digital transformation over the course of the last year. And I just wondered, prior to the pandemic, to what extent was remote pitching, the entire pitching process from ideation to delivery, how much of agency life was that? And have we experienced a rapid transition in terms of that?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. I mean, obviously, we've all kind of had to get used to a new way of working over the last 12 months plus. I mean, for me personally, I've had a global focused role for the last 3, 4, maybe nearly 5 years. So part of that role, sitting across our offices in EMEA, in the US, in APAC, part of that role, it wasn't out of the ordinary for me to be talking with clients virtually. However, when it comes to a pitch process, we would normally all at least be in the same room together, right? So we'd be working up the work together in the room, even if then it kind of went virtually towards the client during the pitch process. So well, that dynamic has obviously changed over the last 12 months. So we've had to work on that. We've had to work on the human connection. I think that natural kind of human resonance that we all imbue into one another during a pitch process, and also into the work and subsequently the client relationships. That's definitely something that has needed some of our focus, I think. Like all of us, though, I'm sure I'm not alone in being a big believer in not being chained to our desks when we're creating, right? I'm not sure that that's necessarily conducive to making the best creative work. And I'm fortunate in that Jellyfish has a really great policy when it comes to balance, when it comes to work and life, when it comes to being in and out of the office. So I think this will continue. I think the last 12 months plus, like I say, has shown that the wheels haven't fallen off. Deadlines have been met, great work has been made. Agencies trust their teams, clients trust their agencies, and I think we've all kind of had to step up and show that we can be trusted. And I think as creatives and individuals, hopefully that's empowering, and hopefully it brings a sense of autonomy to our creatives. So yeah, I think it probably will continue.
Well, that's fantastic. And I saw our other two guests sort of nodding along and smiling about that. I just wondered, Jenny, you sort of nodded along very vehemently when Chris was talking about keeping the human part of that involved. So to what extent has that sort of changed how we think about human interaction remotely during the creative process?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I was nodding a lot because I can identify with quite a lot of what Chris was saying. We've also got, different remote offices, London, Madrid and Dubai. So being able to speak to team members who might not be in the same room isn't unheard of. I think the thing that was more difficult for us was actually the pitch. So the actual moment of presenting that to the client, but not being in the room with them, not being able to read somebody's body language, because we can only really see your head.
Yeah, exactly.
maybe a little bit of the body. It's not the same. And I think that when you're delivering a pitch, you do, whether it's a pitch, whether it's just a sales conversation, a normal conversation even, you do pick up on other people's unknown body language, I suppose. It's not the same being able to see someone from there. And I think that's made it much more difficult. The creative process, yeah, completely agree with Chris. You know, everybody sitting in the same room looking at the same four walls is not going to give us the most creative ideas. So yeah, I think it's fantastic, opened up opportunity and lots of things there. But I think actually delivering that and understanding how the client or potential client is receiving the information is really difficult. And I'm not sure, I don't know if you guys have been able to crack it. We've certainly got better understanding how to do a virtual pitch, but I'm not sure that we've been able to find a way to make it as good as when we were sitting in a room with the client.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. That definitely tracks with what we've seen from research from Opinion and JFDI about how they've actually managed to get feedback after the pitch. And Karl, you were sort of nodding along there as well. So what's been your experience with that?
No, I could totally relate to Jenny. I think with the remote pitching, it is all about kind of reading visual cues. Sometimes, some of the pitches just feels like a comedy show, because it really relies on technology, and it really relies on everyone having great technology, great spaces, and for all of this to be in sync. And I think, occasionally, you'd be pitching, and then some of your colleagues are splitting into two frames because they've got a terrible internet, or occasionally you're presenting and you realize that your slides aren't really moving on or anything like that. And so there is this kind of, I think, technology is still kind of improving in terms of kind of being able to kind of successfully for us to be able to present, and to have the same kind of dynamic and drama when you're presenting in person, I think, because, and I think there's still a need for actual connection, actually to be in the same space with everyone else, because that's how we build connection, where we're people like how we prefer to be, how we prefer to catch up with our friends in real spaces, and with kind of, it's the same in terms of like building connection, building relationships with clients. I feel like, there's still a need for that, but I think we will be smarter with the way we kind of use it. It's like that term, when they say that could have been an email, it would be like, oh, that could have been an online meeting.
Yeah.
But I think there still is going to be a need for an actual in-person, kind of connection, because I think that's how we build relationships. And so I think, it will be less of that, and it will be more of a, it will become like a treat, when you kind of catch up with your kind of clients.
Very nice. Well, I know that we could talk about sort of the impact of this on the actual pitching process that's its own separate session. That's its own separate 2 sessions. But Karl, how much has that actually changed the kind of the creative process, the ideation process from the very start of a pitch all the way through to, or rather a campaign, all the way through to kind of the execution?
I think it's been quite difficult for a lot of creatives in terms of like, with that kind of remote pitching, because, when before, we used to all just gather around a sofa, put your ideas up, it's very relaxed, very casual, banter, and you remove all of that. And then everyone's just in this space like this. Everyone is literally just in that space trying to come up with all of this kind of great ideas in their bubble. Some of them working there, some of them are working in their bedrooms. I'm in my dining table, and it's just all of those kind of creative processes became quite an intense process, I feel. We have the collaboration process have been kind of diminished, and so we really had to kind of find ways to actually introduce that back. And so what we've done is we've really embraced technology, at Colt. Like we've really looked at kind of like applications like Miro boards and things like that, so that we can collaborate as creatives. Screen share. We just like screen share when we're working with our kind of video teams and things like that. But I think it's actually finding those and kind of embracing technology and almost be in sync with technology, and for us to be able to function during the pandemic. It has been difficult, because I feel like the creatives who were actually great at coming up with ideas while they're by themselves. They excelled, but all of the creatives that were, that are collaborators, that they kind of need to have that kind of bouncing point, and they suffered, and so we really had to kind of find ways to actually help with that, and it's all about just trying out all these different things. At one stage, we had like about 8 different apps that everyone was using. It became quite chaotic, but it's actually trying to kind of streamline it and actually finding what works best. And I think that's where we're at the moment.
I see. I think that's really interesting. Actually, talking about the different types of personality, the different types of creative person, isn't something that's been given much focus. And so, Chris, from your perspective, then, to what extent has tech been able to compensate for that, for those different personality types and different ways of being creative?
Yeah, I think tech has been able to help us. We have a tech platform called Vivid that really kind of, to Karl's point, really, it kind of just brings everyone together throughout the creative process. So it's just a really simple way of everyone being able to feed in and collaborate together as the creative process develops, as a project develops. At the right points, it's then shared with clients. They're able to feed in and all kind of continue that collaboration that you would have done in person, albeit virtually, which means that obviously people from around the world can kind of work together seamlessly. So I think tech has been really important. I think also on the flip side as well, one of the biggest benefits from this time that we've been in actually is the fact that we've been given back the gift of time, right? As creatives, that's the one thing, that intangible thing that we're always kind of fighting for. And ultimately that's kind of what we're selling our partners. It's our time, it's our talent and our time. And I think time has kind of increased. We haven't spent that time commuting or traveling, been able to stay really focused in meetings and really kind of carve out the right amount of time for a project, which I think has been a huge benefit throughout this process.
And actually, one thing I wanted to pick up on there, Chris, is Jenny, when Karl was talking, you were sort of nodding along to this idea of the kind of the virtual whiteboard and making sure that everybody's kind of collaborating in a sort of very visual way. So to what extent then have you had to adjust your working practices to account for those kind of those virtual ways of being creative?
Because one of the things we used to do was actually have lots of different coloured post-it notes, and we stick them on the wall, and we would take turns, and you'd have to. There's like a little game you play, and you pick up some things, and you have to create the creative idea. I'm sure you guys have probably done the same type of thing. Well, we were really struggling because, of course, there's no way to do that. But then we found Miro, which is almost exactly the same, with different colour little post-it notes that you can kind of put on this board, and people could move around. It's not quite the same as physically getting up, because I think even just physically getting up and picking something up is automatically making you focused on the thing that you're on. Whereas I think sometimes when you're on Zoom calls or the Miro board or whatever, I find myself drifting off thinking about something else for a moment, because you're not physically, concentrating on that task. But then on the upside, what's really great is that normally we would kind of the idea would be presented or the campaign would be realised or whatever, and then normally what would happen is all those post-it notes and all that stuff would normally be chucked in the bin because it's post-it notes, they just fly away, whatever. Whereas the Miro boards now we keep. So now we have actually a set of ideas and things that we can now kind of go back to and refresh other people's minds around, did you do this? Or people who didn't work on that, but that Miro board has got some interesting things that you might be able to take from. So it's quite nice in that way, because we've got more of a record, I think, of creative ideas. So now we've kind of got a little bit of a brainstorming session secret treasure box or something like that, but I don't think there's a way to be able to keep people's attention in the same way as sitting in the room, standing up, saying your idea, and like Karl said, having a bit of a laugh, maybe having a joke with someone, giving them just a jab or something. Is that exactly what I mean? It's just that interaction that I think we still miss, and I'm not really sure there's a way to be able to get that back. Maybe virtual headsets might be the next
one day. Yeah, no, I've got my virtual headset right here. I'm just waiting for the day when I can use it properly. But actually, that touches upon something that I wanted to bring up when you're talking about having that almost that vault of ideas and that record of the creative process. Is how are we then working on providing feedback as the creative process goes along. I know that might have changed less than the kind of ideation process, because obviously it's a lot of feedback by email or by Slack. But to what extent has that changed as well? How are we then feeding back to the people who are actually creating the visual imagery, the kind of the soundscape of everything?
Well, at Colt, we use a different platform, so we're kind of working on pictures, or working on different creatives. Occasionally we use Google Slides. It's not the most exciting kind of platform we're working in, but you know what it does do though is it helps you kind of work in sync with one another, so that you could be creating and then you can kind of feedback, so that it doesn't become a Zoom meeting. So it doesn't become because what you would find, like especially in the beginning of the pandemic, is that all of our creators were constantly in Zoom meetings and meetings after meetings, kind of receiving feedback or giving feedback or whatnot. And what it did was it actually took away, exactly what Chris said, is it took away that kind of creative time for them to be creating and ideating. And so it's actually working with, Keynote also has that kind of function where, when you're working on a presentation, you can literally feedback live. And so you're basically working in sync like a machine. We've all become into a machine. And I think, during lockdown, that is probably the best way. We found that actually being in one with the machine is probably the best way, rather than actually escalating everything into a meeting, and because the next thing you know, I've been in meetings like all day. And it's like, that is, when you're creative, that is, that's not a great thing to be kind of going through. So it is actually finding that technology that could really, that kind of doesn't take away that kind of creative time if you're a creative. I think are really kind of beneficial.
Yeah, actually, I wondered, Chris, if you could maybe elaborate on that slightly. Is talking about kind of choosing the platform that allows you to be creative as your first focus, and then how you sort of managed having that and also providing enough feedback to shape that into a sort of successful campaign.
Yeah, sure. I mean, like Karl, actually, we're big fans of Google Docs, and I mean, it just allows everybody into the process, seamlessly being able to comment as the work's coming to life, being able to stay kind of as one as the project is kind of developing. I think if that's kind of that's one way, one piece of tech that obviously is kind of being used by all of us, I'm sure. I think the other thing is as Karl says, and with this idea of kind of reclaiming some of that time, we can have really focused meetings. So it means that we can just jump on a quick Zoom, jump on a quick Google Meet, and make sure that we've still got that eye to eye, albeit virtually, kind of moment to be able to talk as creatives, to be able to look each other in the eye and kind of talk about the work, still be able to try and get that sense of connection as we're going through the process. I think one thing I've found actually is in a virtual room, you get a bit more of this sense of focused collaboration rather than that sense of deliberation sometimes. I think when you're all in a room as people, I love it, and I do miss it. I think as Jenny said before, right, being able to, and Karl, being able to all be there together, being able to all kind of bounce off of one another, and particularly at the start and the end of the process, I miss it. But now that we are in a virtual space, sometimes back in the real world, you could get a bit of a sense of deliberation. You almost, sometimes the bigger the room gets, you can get this almost kind of creative by committee sometimes, right? And we need to be able to call it sometimes. We need to be able to say, this is the direction we're going. And I think what I've noticed virtually is that being able to use these types of tech platforms, people kind of all step up to the plate and bring their expertise. They know what they're bringing to the project. They know what they're bringing to the room. And you do get a bit more of that sense of focus, collaboration, and moving forward as one. I think a bit quicker, perhaps sometimes, than back in the olden
days. Yeah, that's fascinating. I haven't heard that sort of advocated as kind of one of the benefits of collaboration. It's almost that renewed focus upon a creative campaign. That's fascinating.
Yes.
And so, Jenny, before you mentioned, all these different offices that you have, I wondered, how has the creative process between those offices changed? How are you sort of incorporating that local expertise?
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things I was just thinking really, as Chris was just answering your question previously, was one of the other things I've noticed is that I think that the virtual space has allowed some of the people who aren't the loudest in the room to also put their ideas forward a little bit more. And I've noticed that a little bit, because especially on the Miro board, you can start writing on your Post-it note, and you can have it there as your idea. And then whoever's kind of chairing the creative process can see that and automatically say, oh, to that person who's maybe a little bit quieter, oh, tell us about that, and bring them in a little bit more. And so I have seen that it's maybe allowed people who've been a bit quieter, not always the first one or dominating the room with their creative idea, or I think it's given that opportunity really for some of the quieter people. And you can be a creative and be very quiet. You don't have to be loud and the only one, your idea is the only one, so I think it's given that, which then means, I think also when you look across different cultures, you have different cultures where some people will naturally sit back a lot more, I think, female versus male, but also there's a culture thing there as well. You've obviously got our brainstorms are usually in English. Obviously we've got Arabic speaking as their first language, Spanish speaking as their first language. Actually, as a business, we have 12 different languages spoken as first languages. So not English is not everybody's first language. And I think that being able to write something down first, where somebody can see that and you've got the ability to kind of share that, I think it's given us more opportunity to hear more ideas, more diversity, because it's allowed people to not just rely perhaps on their voice and their confidence in being heard first, which I think is quite interesting.
Yeah, I mean, not just interesting, laudable, and hopefully something that will be continued after the fact. I mean, that sounds like an unambiguous benefit of kind of the change to this more remote creative process. I mean, I think that's absolutely fascinating. I don't know if that's something that either Chris or Karl, you've sort of experienced as well. I know team setups are different, but are there people who wouldn't necessarily have contributed to the creative process before who are sort of getting more involved in your experience?
Yeah, definitely. I think for some people, this time has been kind of naturally energizing, and you see it in those teams. You see what they bring to the table, and you see the confidence kind of developing. And I think as Jenny says as well, kind of culturally, there are obviously some creatives that are going to be kind of a little bit more forthcoming, a little bit more forthright, some that are going to be maybe quieter in the room. But yeah, in a virtual space, I've absolutely seen that's absolutely been true.
Chris, it's the same with us at Colt. I've noticed, some really blossomed, during this event. It is to do with the technology that we're kind of using. Suddenly they've got this kind of voice that they, that's usually, I think they're probably usually dampened, in an office environment, with kind of big personalities and all of that kind of stuff. And then suddenly we're just all in this kind of, we're all virtual and we're all equal, really. Everyone's just and the only thing that kind of would probably differentiate you is your surrounding, but because you're inviting people in your intimate space. But other than that, I think it really has given a voice to a lot of creators.
That's such a good point. That it democratizes the process in a way, doesn't it?
Completely.
I can totally relate to that, Karl. It's people have felt equal in being able to voice their opinion, voice their ideas, voice their ways of thinking. And I think that's a real benefit for certain creatives.
Completely, but I think there's still an awkwardness. I think, especially with this kind of online kind of chatting, you're literally looking at. Have you noticed that? Like you're talking to people and you're literally reading their body language in this kind of thumbnails, and then I constantly accidentally talking over people. It's still slightly awkward, and so. But I think hopefully technology will be able to kind of resolve that.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of all the failed attempts to sort of try to resolve that, having everybody in sort of the same virtual space, and it just doesn't work at the moment because you're just looking at yourself a lot of the time. It's one of those kind of little drawbacks.
It's not great for me, Chris. Like I've I think sometimes you forget that you're in, you know, that it is an actual meeting. Occasionally, because I've got this kind of face roller. I work on like, you know, I feel like I've been in meetings where I've been like, yeah, and I'm just like, and because you're in your own personal space and you totally forget, you know. But I think other than that, you know, it has become, I think we've made it work, you know. When we've learned to kind of work with technology a lot better.
Yeah. Well, thanks for that visual demonstration as well. I know that I've never done anything like that. I always frown. I know that if I get an email notification, people must think I'm really pissed off at their idea or something, because I'll just suddenly get. But yeah, and actually that sort of leads neatly onto sort of our final question, which is, who are going to be the big beneficiaries of this remote creativity? We've mentioned the individuals who maybe work better creatively in terms of using kind of tech to collaborate and it really democratizing the process. But what about the people who are not necessarily able to, you know, have been introduced to big teams before? Maybe they live outside one of the big marketing hubs. Who are going to be the big beneficiaries of people who are sort of looking to break into the industry maybe, or who have previously struggled to find footing in the industry? Are we going to see more people from kind of more diverse backgrounds, from more diverse geographies? Are we going to see them really benefiting from this creatively?
I think so. I think it also gives the ability for us to consider, I mean, even though we've got the 3 different offices and we were all quite used to some sort of remote, maybe not the same as lockdown, obviously, but some sort of remote, we would have expected to have met in person somebody that we were going to work with. Whereas during lockdown, we had to, you know, reach out to some specialists, for example, that we didn't have the chance to invite into an office location, because obviously they couldn't have traveled to see us and we couldn't have got to the office to see them anyway. And so it's kind of broken a bit of a barrier in that sense, where we've got the ability to tap into new talent that we probably wouldn't have been able to before, because we'd have said, no, our rule is we must meet you first. And It doesn't mean that we can just take any old person, obviously, but I do think it allows us to kind of change that mindset to say, well, actually, let's explore that as an opportunity. That isn't now a barrier. And I think that opens up to diverse, because, of course, there's people in many different countries with fantastic talent that aren't in our 3 offices, and we wouldn't expect them to fly to see us for that reason, for us, you know, one particular campaign or one particular job. So yeah, I think it opens the door to more talent, more diversity, definitely.
I second that. At Cole, we're going through this thing at the moment where actually, you know, everyone's working remotely currently, and we're actually, you know, a lot of our staff are all spread out throughout England now. When before, you know, everyone was in London. You know, I've got staff in Scotland, I've got creative stuff in Wales and also Midlands. When before, you know, you would literally think of kind of people, you know, people within London. And I think what it's done is it actually opened up. The world became smaller, and we're able to tap into more amazing talent. Like you know, like some of the talents that, because of the pandemic, I was able to kind of work with, have, you know, it actually made us more, it definitely made the world smaller, and we're able to actually access those talent, and you know, your talent becomes more diverse, and it actually opens up this opportunity for creatives throughout the country to be able to actually apply for any other agencies, because, you know, our ways of thinking have changed. We know that we can work remotely, and we can successfully work remotely, and yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and again, I just agree with that from what's previously been said. I think, you know, hopefully this is a moment to kind of level the playing field, right? Over the last, again, 12 months plus, we've really seen just the types of people that we follow online. We've seen amazing creativity from artists, from writers, from poets, from musicians, songwriters. We've seen amazing creativity happening. And that creativity hasn't been happening in one corner of the country, right? So we need to really try and galvanize all of that talent, galvanize those fresh voices to continue powering our industry forward. And it's then my hope that this actually leads to opportunity. I think if we can get this right, if we can get remote creativity right, people are going to benefit. Creatives are going to benefit, firstly, because it's not going to be so city-centric. It's not going to be so London or Birmingham or Manchester, Edinburgh, insert other city kind of thing. It's not going to be so destination focused. clients then benefit from more diverse thinking, and the industry as a whole really sees new and fresh talent kind of coming to life from different cultures, different subcultures. I think it's hopefully a really important moment for us and our world.
Nice. Well, fantastic. Unfortunately, we sort of come to the end of our time for this session. I know we could have spoken about any one of those issues for at least an hour a piece each. But I want to say thank you so much to Chris, to Jenny, and to Karl for joining us for this discussion. It's been absolutely fantastic. And to the audience at home, please do stick around. There's plenty more to come for CT Fest on thedrum.com. Thank you for joining us today, and goodbye.